There she stood, in a white dress that cost more than most people make in a year, flowers in her hands, guests in their seats, a man at the altar waiting for her to say 2 words that would chain her to a life she never chose. And then the doors opened, not for her, for him, the man who was never supposed to be there, the man she had spent 3 years trying to forget, the man who had more money than some countries, and apparently absolutely no respect for wedding invitations. He walked in like he owned the building, because he did. He owned the building. The street was on, and probably half the city outside those stained glass windows. He walked straight down the aisle, not fast, not slow, like a man who had already decided how this day was going to end and was simply walking toward the conclusion. The priest stopped speaking. The groom turned around. Every single guest in that room held their breath, and when he reached the altar, he looked at the man standing there, the man with the ring, the suit, the legal right, and he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He didn't say a word. He unfolded it slowly. Let everyone see what it was. A marriage contract. Her name. Another man's name. Signatures. Dates. Legal stamps. He looked at it for one long moment. Then he tore it in half. Then he tore it again. Then he let the pieces fall to the floor like confetti at a funeral. And then he looked at her. Not the guests. Not the groom. Not the priest. Her. And he said 4 words. You were always mine. Before we go any further, if the story already has your heart beating faster, do this right now. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs a story that will wreck them emotionally in the best possible way. And drop a comment below. Tell me, what do you think she said back to him? Because what happens next is going to change everything you think you know about love, power, sacrifice, and what it really means to fight for someone. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because this story didn't start at that altar. It started 3 years earlier, on a Tuesday morning, in a coffee shop that was about to go out of business. Her name was Grace, not the kind of Grace that belongs in ballrooms or penthouse elevations. The kind of Grace that belongs in a small kitchen at 6 in the morning, making lunches for a father who can't remember her name some days. The kind of Grace that tips 20% even when she can't afford to. The kind that smiles at strangers and means it. She was 28 years old. She had a business degree she'd never use because her mother got sick before she could use it. And by the time her mother passed, her father had already started forgetting things. First small things, then big things, then her. She ran a small coffee shop in downtown Chicago that her mother had built from nothing, a place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu, and the kind of coffee that made people feel like somebody somewhere still cared about doing things right. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, or it had been. That Tuesday morning, she was sitting across from a man in a gray suit who worked for a development company she had never heard of, and he was telling her, very politely, with a leather folder open on the table between them, that she had 30 days to vacate the premises. The building had been sold. The new owner wanted to develop the land. Her lease had a clause she hadn't noticed, a clause her mother's old lawyer had never mentioned. And now, at 28, with a sick father and no savings and staff of 4 people who depended on her for paychecks, she was sitting in her own coffee shop being told she had 30 days to disappear. She didn't cry, not in front of the man in the gray suit. She thanked him. She stood up. She shook his hand. She walked to the back room, sat down on a bag of coffee beans, pressed her hands over her mouth, and let the tears come quietly. Nobody saw her. That was always how she did the hard things. Alone, quietly, without making anyone feel uncomfortable. What she didn't know, what she had absolutely no way of knowing, was that the man who had bought her building was going to walk to the front door of her shop in exactly 47 minutes. Not the man in the gray suit, the man himself. His name was Marcus Cole, 34 years old, built like someone who had been tested by something harder than a gym. Dark eyes that didn't waste time on things that didn't matter. A jaw that looked like it had been carved by someone who was angry that day. He had a net worth that financial magazines argued about. Some said 12 billion. Some said 15. He'd stopped caring about the number around the time it stopped having any real meaning. What people didn't know about Marcus Cole What his rivals and his board members and the women who had tried to get close to him never quite figured out was that he was deeply, profoundly, almost embarrassingly sentimental about small things. Old bookstores, diners that still had jukeboxes, the smell of coffee in the morning, when it came from somewhere that actually meant it. He'd been walking past her shop for 2 years. He'd never gone in. He always told himself it was because he was busy, because there was a better coffee place in his building, because he didn't need the distraction. The real reason was that there was something about the little shop with the mismatched chairs that made him feel something he didn't have time to feel. And Marcus Cole had spent the last decade becoming very good at not feeling things he didn't have time for. But that Tuesday morning, his driver had taken a different route because of a water main break, and Marcus had gotten out to walk the last 6 blocks, and he'd passed the shop from the other direction. And through the window, he'd seen a woman in a gray apron standing behind the counter looking at something on the wall. Just looking. Like the thing on the wall was the most important thing in the world. He pushed open the door before he finished deciding to. The bell above the door rang. Grace turned around. She had been looking at a photograph her mother had hung on the wall the day they opened. Her mother in this exact spot, holding 2 cups of coffee, grinning like she just won the lottery. She wiped her face fast. Professional. She was good at that. "Welcome in," she said. "What can I get you?" He stood at the door for a moment longer than was normal, looking around the shop like he was reading it. The mismatched chairs, the handwritten chalkboard, the little vase of fake flowers on each table because she couldn't afford real ones but believed in the principle. "Just coffee," he said. "Just coffee is kind of our specialty," she said. She turned to the machine. He sat at the counter. Not a table. The counter. Which nobody ever did because most people felt awkward at counters, too exposed, no furniture between themselves and the world. He didn't seem to mind being exposed. She made his coffee the way she made everyone's, with attention, with the small rituals her mother had taught her, the exact temperature, the exact time, the way you hold the cup when you hand it over, slightly below eye level, so the person receiving it doesn't have to reach up. He took it. He tasted it. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "This is the best coffee I've had in 4 years." She almost laughed, would have, except the image of the man in the gray suit was still sitting in the back of her mind, the leather folder open on the table. 30 days written at the top of the document. "Thank you," she said. "It'll be the last batch from this machine. We're closing." She hadn't meant to say it out loud to a stranger. It came out before she could stop it. He looked up from the cup. "Closing," he repeated. "Sold," she said. And then, because there was something about the way he was looking at her, direct, no performance, just actual attention, she said, "The building got sold. New owner wants to develop. 30 days. He was quiet. "I'm sorry," he said. She shrugged. The way people shrug when they want to look like something doesn't hurt as much as it does. Everything ends eventually. She went to clear a table. He watched her. And something happened in his chest that he was not equipped to explain and was not going to examine until much later, too much later. As it turned out, he left cash on the counter, 3 times what the coffee cost. He walked out. He sat in the back of his car and said one sentence to his assistant, who was waiting with a tablet full of his schedule. "Find out who bought the building on Meridian and Lake, the one with the coffee shop." His assistant found out in 11 minutes. Marcus Cole had bought the building on Meridian and Lake, his own development division, a land acquisition he'd signed off on 8 months ago without reading the details because it was one of 40 deals that week. He sat with that information for a very long time. He came back the next morning. She was surprised to see him. Not that she showed it. She made his coffee the same way. He sat at the counter the same way. This time he asked her name. "Grace," she said. "Marcus," he said. She didn't know the last name. He didn't offer it. And she didn't have her phone out, so she couldn't do what everyone else did when they met him. That little micro-flinch of recognition, the recalibration of behavior, the sudden excessive politeness that he had come to hate more than almost anything. She just treated him like a man at a counter who wanted coffee. It was the most disorienting experience he'd had in years. He came back the day after that. And the day after that, on the 4th day, he came back and she had a different look about her. Tired, not sleep tired. The other kind. Bad day, he asked. I found my dad this morning, she said. He'd gotten out of the apartment and walked 3 blocks before someone called me. He does that sometimes. He doesn't always know where he is. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you say things when you've been carrying them so long they've lost the power to surprise you. He has dementia? Marcus asked. Early stage, they said 2 years ago. It's not early stage anymore. Do you have help? I have me, she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment. Drink some water, he said. She blinked. What? People forget to drink water when they're stressed. You look like you haven't had any today. She stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached under the counter and got a glass and filled it at the tap and drank. Happy? She said. Something moved across his face. Something brief. Something that looked unfamiliar on him, like a word in a language he'd studied but never spoken out loud. Working on it, he said. By the end of the first week, she had started looking up when the door opened. She told herself it was because any walk-in customer was precious given the circumstances. She was lying to herself. By the end of the second week, she had stopped pretending. He came every morning, sometimes for 15 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He never looked at his phone when he was there, which was remarkable for a man whose phone she assumed was essentially an organ of his body at this point. He asked her things, real things, not polite things. He asked her about her mother, about how she'd learned to make coffee this way, about what she would have done with her business degree if things had gone differently. She asked him things too. He answered honestly, more honestly than she expected. He told her that he'd built his company not because he dreamed of being rich, but because he'd grown up watching his family lose everything and had decided, at 13, that he would never feel that particular helplessness again. Did it work? She asked. He thought about it for longer than most people would. Financially, he said, yes. She understood what that meant. The part he didn't say. She always understood the parts people didn't say. That was her gift and also, sometimes, her burden. On the 14th day, she was turning the close sign when he came in. 10 minutes after closing, she almost locked the door. She didn't. You're late, she said. I know, he said. I'm sorry. She made him his coffee. He stood at the counter instead of sitting, like he was about to say something, and needed to be on his feet for it. I know who owns the building, he said. She froze, just for a second. Then she kept moving, wiping the counter. I figured you might, she said. You have the look of someone who knows things they're not sure how to say. It's me, he said. My company. I signed off on the acquisition 8 months ago. The rag in her hand stopped moving. She didn't look at him. I didn't know about the coffee shop, he said, or about the lease clause. I sign a lot of paperwork. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. Silence. And now, she said, I'd like to fix it. Fix it how? I'll have my legal team rewrite the terms. You can stay. Extended lease. Fair rent. No development clause. She turned around then, looking at him the way people look at something they want very badly, but don't entirely trust. Why? She said. You lose money on that deal. Not much, he said. Some, he agreed. Why? He met her eyes, and the honest answer was sitting right there between them, visible and terrifying, and he was a man who had not been terrified of much in the last decade. Because you make the best coffee I've had in 4 years, he said, and I'm selfish. She looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she said, I don't want charity. It's not charity, he said. It's a business correction. That's what rich people call charity, she said. His mouth almost moved. Almost. Will you at least look at the new terms before you decide? I'll look, she said. I'm not promising anything. I know, he said. He left. She stood in the empty shop for 20 minutes before she turned off the lights. She looked at the terms. They were generous. They were also completely legitimate. Her lawyer, a friend from college who owed her a favor, reviewed them and said, Grace, this is a good deal. Take it. She took it. She didn't tell Marcus right away. She made him wait 3 days. Made him come in every morning not knowing. She couldn't have told you exactly why she did that. Maybe because she needed to see if he'd keep coming even with the uncertainty. Maybe because she needed to feel like she had a little control over at least one thing in her life. He kept coming. On the third day, she slid the signed papers across the counter with his coffee. He looked at them, looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "Don't make me regret it," she said. "I'll try not to." She made his coffee. He sat at the counter. And the morning went the way mornings do when everything is slightly, dangerously better than it was yesterday. 3 months passed. There's something particular about mornings with someone when mornings are the only time you have. They become precious in a way that evenings and afternoons never quite manage. There's no performance in the morning. No version of yourself you've had time to prepare. You're just the person you are before the day changes you. Marcus Cole, in the mornings before the meetings and the negotiations and the weight of running something as large and complex as what he'd built, was, and this surprised him to discover, a relatively simple man. He liked coffee. He liked silence that wasn't empty. He liked watching someone who was good at something do that thing. Grace was good at her thing. She was also good at the harder thing, which was making people feel like they mattered, not in the performed customer service way, in the way that costs something, the way that means you actually have to pay attention and care about what you find. She remembered how everyone took their coffee. She remembered their names. She remembered that the older man who came every Tuesday was going through a divorce and would appreciate it if she mentioned his new haircut. She remembered that the young woman who came in with the laptop in the anxious hands was writing a novel, and once she'd asked about it, and the woman had lit up like a lamp being switched on. She paid attention. Marcus, who had built an empire partly on his ability to read people accurately and quickly, found himself stunned by how much he could read in the same amount of time. She was better at it than him. She was better at it than almost anyone he'd ever met. He started staying longer. She started leaving the closed sign on a few minutes after he arrived, just so the morning wouldn't be interrupted. They both pretended they weren't doing what they were doing. They were doing it anyway. One morning in early November, when the cold had arrived in Chicago the way it does, not gradually but all at once, as if the city had made a decision overnight, he came in, and she was at the back table with her father. She'd had no one to watch him that morning. So he was here, in his good sweater, with a paper cup of decaf and a plate of shortbread cookies, looking at everything with particular soft wonder, a man whose world had grown small but peaceful. She looked up when Marcus came in. Something crossed her face. Not quite embarrassment. More like the expression of someone showing you a room they'd meant to tidy first. "Slow morning," she said. "I see that," he said. Her father looked up at Marcus. "Hello," said her father. "Are you the coffee man?" "I'm a customer," Marcus said, sitting down, not at the counter, at the table next to them. "Grace makes good coffee," her father said, with the pride of a man who had contributed something to this outcome, even if he couldn't quite remember how. "She does," Marcus said. "Best I've had." Her father smiled, went back to his cookies. Grace brought Marcus his coffee and sat back down with her father, and the three of them existed in the same quiet for a while. Outside the window, Chicago was gray and cold and moving fast, all of it in a hurry to be somewhere else. Inside the shop, nobody was in a hurry. Later, when her father had fallen gently asleep in a chair, Grace and Marcus sat in that particular kind of silence that only exists when two people have run out of things to hide behind. "He was an engineer," she said very quietly. "He designed bridges. He could hold the whole geometry of a bridge in his head. Every load, every tension point, every stress calculation. Just in here." She touched her temple. "And now some days he can't remember that fork's going left." Marcus said nothing. He just listened. "I'm not sad about it anymore," she said. "I was for a long time. Now I'm just present. I'm just here for whatever version of him I get that day. Some days I get a lot. Some days I get a little. But I get something." She looked at her father sleeping. "He always knows I love him," she said. "Even on the bad days. That part never goes." Marcus looked at her for a long time. Then he said quietly, "My father died 8 years ago. Heart attack. We hadn't spoken in 2 years before that. I kept thinking there was more time." She looked at him. "I'm sorry," she said. "I built half of this company after that," he said. I think I thought if I built enough, I could build past the guilt. Did it work? He gave her the same answer he'd given before. Financially. She nodded. Then, because she was Grace and she paid attention, she reached across the table and put her hand over his. Not romantically. The way you cover someone's hand when what you really want to say is too big for words. He looked down at her hand on his. He didn't move. For a man who controlled things for a living, sitting still and letting something touch him was, apparently, the hardest thing he'd done in a long time. By December, they were not pretending anymore. Or rather, they were still pretending. But they were doing it badly, and they both knew it. And there was a particular kind of sweetness in the badly done pretending that neither of them wanted to end by being honest too soon. He brought her things. Small things. A book he thought she'd like. A very good olive oil from a market he'd passed. A very small, very good recording of a pianist he'd heard in a hotel lobby, once that had stopped him cold in the middle of the lobby, and he'd stood there until it ended. She made him things. Small things. Extra cookies wrapped in brown paper. A note sometimes, tucked into the bag. Not a significant note, just something she'd noticed. An interesting thing she'd read. A sentence that had stayed with her. Once, just the words. The light was particularly good this morning. He kept the notes. She would have been surprised to know that. He didn't seem like a man who kept notes. He kept all of them. In December, there was a night, a work event he'd had to attend, a charity gala for a children's hospital that his company co-sponsored, where across the room, through 400 people in formal wear, he had seen a woman in a dark green dress talking to a waitress with the kind of genuine attention that stopped him the way the pianist had stopped him, and he'd thought, before he'd even processed what he was feeling, I need to know her better. And then 2 seconds later, he'd realized the woman in the dark green dress was Grace. She'd been invited by a client, someone she'd catered a small corporate event for. She'd mentioned she was going. He hadn't made the connection. He made his way through the crowd. She saw him coming. Her eyes widened slightly. The specific expression of someone who is seeing someone from one context appear in a very different context, and their brain is recalibrating. Marcus, she said. Grace, he said. And then, because there was music, and because the universe was being a little obvious about it, he said, dance with me. She looked at him. I'm not sure that's a great idea, she said. Probably not, he agreed. She danced with him anyway. She was not a practiced ballroom dancer. He was, because he'd had to be for 100 of these events, and he was good enough to make her look good too. He held her the right distance away. Professional, and they talked while they danced. The way you can talk at a party when you're dancing, because somehow the movement gives you cover. You look different, he said. It's the dress, she said. It's not the dress, he said. She looked up at him. They were close enough that this required care. Don't, she said. I'm not doing anything, he said. You're doing something, she said. He said nothing. The music played. They moved. Marcus, she said, very quietly. I can't do whatever this is. I have a father who needs full-time care. I have a business that's still not fully stable. I have approximately zero bandwidth for, she paused, for whatever this is. I know, he said. Then stop looking at me like that. I'm working on it. She almost laughed. Caught it. I'm serious, she said. So am I, he said. And the way he said it made very clear that the working on it was genuine and also not going especially well. The song ended. They stepped apart. He got her a drink. They stood together for a while, talking about something else, both of them aware of the exact distance between them. At the end of the night, in the lobby, waiting for her car, she said, Thank you for the dance. Thank you for saying yes, he said. It wasn't a yes to anything, she said. I know, he said. She got in the car. He watched it leave. He stood on the steps of the gala in his expensive suit in the cold Chicago night and felt something he'd been successfully not feeling for 10 years pressing against the inside of his chest like it wanted out. He let it press. He wasn't ready to let it out yet. January arrived, and January in this story is where things begin to break. Not immediately. Not all at once. The way things actually break. Slowly in the dark, where you can't see them going, until one day you reach for something that should be solid and find it already gone. The first break was small. His assistant, a woman named Judith who had worked for him for 6 years and who had, over time, accumulated a kind of protective authority over his schedule that verged on maternal, told him quietly one morning that there had been talk. "What kind of talk?" he asked. "About the coffee shop," Judith said. "About how much time you spend there. Some of the board members have noticed, particularly Patterson. Richard Patterson, board member. Old money. The kind of man who believed very strongly in the appearance of things and had very specific ideas about what was appropriate for the head of a company of their size. Patterson can mind his own calendar," Marcus said. "He's making it his business." Judith said carefully, "He's been asking questions about the woman who owns the shop." Marcus went very still. "What kind of questions?" "Background, history, financial situation." He paid for a full profile. The very particular feeling of something cold moving through him that was not cold but was the body's way of signaling danger. When, 2 weeks ago, "I only found out yesterday. I thought you should know." He should have told Grace. He knows that now. He should have told her that day. Should have walked into the shop and said, "Someone is looking into you. Someone with resources and motivation. Be careful." He didn't. He told himself it was because he didn't want to worry her. That was part of it. The other part, the part he didn't examine closely enough, was that telling her would mean admitting what was between them. And he wasn't ready for that admission. Not yet. Not in that form. Delay, in this story, costs everything. The second break came 3 weeks later. It came in the form of a man named Daniel Ashford, handsome in a polished, available way, 36, an architect, new to Chicago. He came into the coffee shop on a Wednesday because a colleague had recommended it, and he sat at the counter, and he and Grace talked for 45 minutes about nothing in particular. Marcus came in on Thursday. Grace seemed lighter than usual. He noticed everything about her. "Good day yesterday?" he asked. "Actually, yes," she said. "I had a really nice conversation with a customer. He was funny. We talked for almost an hour." Something shifted behind his eyes. He kept his face neutral. "Good," he said. "He's coming back today," she said, glancing at the door. Then, looking back at Marcus, "Is that okay?" The question was pointed. She was paying attention, too. She always was. "Why would it not be okay?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Good question," she said. Daniel Ashford came in at 10:30. He was exactly what Marcus had assembled in his head. Easy, warm, uncomplicated in the way that people are uncomplicated when they haven't been through things yet. He talked to Grace with the open, forward energy of a man who knows what he wants and doesn't have a complicated relationship with wanting it. Marcus sat at the counter and watched. He said nothing. What he felt was enormous and had no name yet. He left earlier than usual. Said he had meetings, which was always true, technically. Grace watched him leave. She knew what she was watching. She'd been watching it build for months. And she was, under the warmth and the attention and the very good coffee, a woman with scars. A woman who had spent years being the person who gave and waited and hoped and found, eventually, that she was doing alone. She liked Marcus. Deeply, in a way that had become structural, like load-bearing walls. She also knew that Marcus Cole had not said one single word about what he wanted from her. And she was 31 years old, and her father needed her, and she could absolutely not, spend the limited energy she had on a man who kept his feelings under glass. Daniel Ashford was simple. He was present. He said things out loud. She went to dinner with him on Friday night. Marcus found out on Monday. He came in and she told him herself, directly, because that was how she was. "I went to dinner with someone," she said, handing him his coffee. He held the cup. "The architect," he said. "His name is Daniel," she said. "It was nice. He's a nice person." Silence. "Good," he said. "Is it?" she said. He looked at her. They were standing on opposite sides of a counter that had always felt like a comfortable distance, and now felt like exactly what it was, a barrier. "Grace," he started. "Don't," she said. "Don't do the thing where you say something that means nothing and I'm supposed to read it. You've been coming in here for 4 months. You've been kind and present and wonderful and—" She stopped. Took a breath. I like you. You know I like you. But liking you isn't a plan, Marcus. And I don't have room for people who aren't sure. He opened his mouth. Closed it. She held his gaze. Are you sure? She said. The thing in his chest pressed harder than it ever had. The answer was enormous. It was right there. It had been right there for months. He thought about Patterson's questions. The profile. What it meant for her to be connected to him. The scrutiny, the exposure, the complexity. He thought about what her life was, and what his life was, and how badly those two things could go together if he wasn't careful. He thought about his father, and the 2 years of silence, and how everything he'd built since was partly an armor against getting close enough to something to lose it. And instead of saying the thing that was true, he said, I don't want to complicate your life. She nodded slowly. One nod, very controlled. Okay, she said. Thank you for being honest. She moved to the other end of the counter. He drank his coffee. He left. He sat in the back of his car and said nothing for 11 minutes. Judith, watching him from the front seat, said nothing either. She had been with him long enough to know the difference between the silences. This was the bad one. He stopped coming to shop every day. He told himself it was the right thing. Space. Clarity. Letting her have the uncomplicated thing with the uncomplicated man. He came once a week instead. Wednesdays. He told himself this too was reasonable. Grace was Grace. She was kind and professional, and made his coffee the same way. She asked about his week. He asked about her father. The warmth was still there. It wasn't the kind of warmth that disappears just because you decide to be sensible. But there was something new over it, a careful layer, like the glass he'd always kept between himself and the feeling. Except now she had one too. It was worse than he'd expected. Daniel Ashford came in on Saturdays. Marcus knew this because Judith, who had decided at some point to do this entirely uninstructed, kept him peripherally informed, not in a report, in passing comments. The way someone who cares about you drops information so that you can do something with it if you choose to. Marcus chose not to do anything with it. He was very good at choosing not to do things. Spring came, then summer, then fall arrived again, 1 year after the story began, and on a Wednesday in October Marcus came in and Grace had a ring on her left hand. Not a large ring. Modest. Tasteful. He looked at it. She looked at him looking at it. Daniel asked me. She said, quietly. And you said yes, he said. I said yes, she said. The coffee machine made its sounds. Outside, Chicago moved. The mismatched chairs sat in their spots. The photograph of her mother was on the wall. Congratulations, he said. Thank you, she said. She handed him his coffee. He left. He sat in the back of the car for 22 minutes this time. Judith didn't say anything. She didn't need to. He told himself it was fine. He was a man who had built billions by telling himself things were fine, and then making them fine through force of will and strategic action. He had applied this approach to every hard thing in his life, and it had worked reliably the way a tool works when you use it consistently. It stopped working at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in November when he was lying in his penthouse on the 43rd floor of the Chicago skyline, doing his thing outside the window. All that light, all that human effort, all those lit windows full of people living their actual lives. And he understood, with the clarity that only comes when you're tired enough to stop protecting yourself from clarity, that he had made a catastrophic mistake. Not the kind you make out of malice. The kind you make out of fear. The kind that happens when you've been hurt before, not by a person but by time and circumstance and the particular cruelty of loving something and losing it. And you decide, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that the safest thing is to keep the thing you love at exactly the distance where it can warm you but not reach you. Grace had reached him. That was the truth. She'd gotten past every defense he'd built. Not by trying to, but by being so completely and utterly herself that his defenses had simply not known what to do with her. And he had stood at the counter of her coffee shop and been asked directly whether he was sure. And he had failed her, not with cruelty, with cowardice, which is, in its own way, worse. He got up. He went to his desk. He sat there for a long time. He had nothing actionable to do. She'd said yes to another man. She was engaged. That was real. That was a door closing. He sat at the desk until the sun came up. He made a decision. Not a good decision. Not a healthy decision. The decision a man makes when he's run out of the kind of patience that lets you accept things and has arrived at the kind of desperation that makes a different kind of sense. He was going to be at that wedding. He didn't know what he would do. He didn't know what he would say. He just knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent a year learning the exact dimensions of his own mistake, that he was not going to let a door close without putting himself in the frame. The engagement was 8 months long. During those 8 months, Marcus Cole did something he had not done in a decade. He did the work, not the business work. He'd always done that. The other work, the kind that requires sitting with therapists in a quiet office on Tuesday afternoons and saying things you've never said out loud and watching them lose some of their power once they're in the air. He did that. He called his mother, whom he kept at a careful distance since his father died, and he talked to her for 3 hours. He went to see her in Philadelphia. He sat in her kitchen, a small kitchen, a real kitchen, with a coffee maker that was nothing like what Grace had and still made something warm. And he talked to her about his father and the 2 years of silence and the guilt and what he built on top of it. His mother listened. Then she said, "You're talking about someone." "I made a mistake," he said. "How bad?" "She's engaged to someone else." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Do you love her?" He hadn't said it out loud to anyone. Hadn't said it at all. Even in the dark at 3 in the morning. Just felt it, enormous and structural, like something that had grown into the foundations of him. "Yes," he said. "Then why are you in my kitchen?" He almost smiled. "Working up to it," he said. "Marcus," his mother said, in the voice she'd had when he was 13 and angry and convinced the world was doing things to him. The world doesn't give you a lot of chances at this kind of thing. And the people who deserve it the least always wait the longest and then act like it's fate when really it's just finally getting out of your own way. He looked at his coffee. "The wedding is in 6 weeks, he said. "Then you have 6 weeks to figure out what you're going to say." "I've been figuring it out for 8 months. "Then you should be ready." He went home to Chicago. He was not ready. He went anyway. The morning of the wedding, he put on the suit he had made 3 months earlier, which was a thing he'd done without admitting to himself exactly why he was having a new suit made with such care on exactly that timeline. He stood in the mirror of his 43rd floor apartment and looked at himself. He was 36 years old. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He had an empire that occupied the working hours of thousands of people. He had everything that was supposed to make a person feel whole. He felt like a man walking to the most important meeting of his life with no agenda, no leverage, and no guarantees. "Good," said a small part of him. "Now you know what it feels like." He took the contract from his desk drawer. The copy he had made of the marriage contract Daniel Ashford and Grace had filed. His lawyer had obtained it legally. Public record once filed. Marcus had read it 3 times. Not because he needed to, because it was real, and he needed to let it be real before he could do what he was about to do. He folded it, put it in his inside jacket pocket. He went downstairs. He got in the car. The ceremony was at St. Paul's Chapel, an old church, beautiful in the way old things are beautiful. Not because they were designed to impress, but because they had stayed through everything and were still standing. There were 300 guests. Marcus Cole was not on the list. He arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony began. The door was unlocked, because church doors are. He walked in. He stood at the back for a moment, the light from the stained glass cutting across the floor in colors, the organ playing softly, the air smelling of flowers and with polish and particular solemnity of something that is about to be permanent. He walked down the aisle. He heard the sound move through the room like a wave, the turning of heads, the caught breaths. He recognized a few faces, a woman he'd done business with, a man from a charity board, a young couple who had clearly no idea who he was, but sensed from a room's reaction that something had changed. At the end of the aisle, at the altar, stood Daniel Ashford in a good suit, looking at Marcus the way a man looks at something that makes him feel things he doesn't have a name for yet. And next to Daniel, Grace, in the white dress, with the flowers. She turned when the room turned, and their eyes met across the length of that church, and across the length of the year that had passed, and across the length of everything that had been built and held and not said and protected and lost, and he kept walking. He reached the altar. He looked at Daniel Ashford for one moment, not with hostility, not with performance, just I am here. I know what this costs. I am here anyway. Then he looked at Grace. He reached into his jacket and took out the contract. He let her see what it was. He let the room see. He opened it. He tore it in half. Then again, let the pieces fall. And he said 4 words. You were always mine. The silence lasted a very long time. Not actually. Probably 7 seconds. But the kind of 7 seconds that don't pass the way regular seconds pass. Daniel Ashford said, "What is this?" His voice was controlled. A good man, trying to understand. Marcus did not look at him. He was looking at Grace. Grace was looking at the pieces of paper on the floor. Then she looked up at Marcus. Her face was doing many things at once. Things that took years to make and a lifetime to read correctly. The priest, who had seen approximately none of this in 40 years of weddings, said very carefully, "Perhaps we should." "No," Grace said. Everyone waited. She was looking at Marcus. "You tore up a legal document," she said. Her voice was quiet, precise, in front of 300 people. "Yes," he said. "That doesn't make it void," she said. "I know," he said. "That's not why I did it." "Then why?" He said, "Because I have been standing on the wrong side of the counter for a year, and I needed to do something that couldn't be taken back." She blinked, one single blink. And if you were watching carefully, and 300 people were watching very carefully, you could see what that blink cost her. Daniel stepped forward. "Grace." His voice was careful, the voice of a man who loves someone and is beginning to understand something he doesn't want to understand. "Do you know this man?" She kept her eyes on Marcus. "Yes," she said. "I know him." "Who is he?" A pause. "He's someone I told to be sure," she said. "And he wasn't. Or he didn't say, so in time. And then you were there, and you were kind, and you were sure, and I—" Her voice broke slightly, just slightly. "I chose the sure thing." Daniel said very quietly, "And now?" She finally looked at him, and what was in her eyes, looking at Daniel Ashford, was genuine, real care, real gratitude. The look of a woman who meant everything she promised, who had not been pretending, who had truly tried. "Daniel," she said, "you are a good man. You are so good." "But," said Daniel. The but was already there. She hadn't needed to say it. He'd seen it coming for a while. He'd chosen not to look directly at it. The tear that rolled down Grace's face was not for Marcus. It was for Daniel, for the kindness she was about to break. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Daniel looked at her for a long time. Then he straightened his jacket, nodded once. The nod of someone absorbing something enormous and deciding to carry it with dignity. He stepped away from the altar. He walked back down the aisle. 300 people parted for him. The door opened. He was gone. And then it was just Grace and Marcus and 300 people who were all going to have a very interesting story to tell at work on Monday. The priest, who had reached a point of pastoral shock that transcended ordinary surprise, said, "I'll just, yes," and retreated toward the vestry. Guests began the complicated business of not knowing what to do. Some spoke quietly. Some reached for phones. A woman in the 3rd row was definitely crying, and honestly fair. Marcus and Grace stood at the altar. She looked at him. "I'm going to need you to start talking," she said. "Right now. And I need it to be real. Not careful. Not managed. Real." He looked at her. And for the first time in the entire year, he let the glass down. "I fell in love with you in a coffee shop," he said, "in October, when you made coffee like it mattered. And I came back every day, because you were the only place I felt like myself in a very long time, and I was terrified of what that meant, and I handled it badly. And I have spent 8 months doing the work to become a man who can tell you that without making it about protecting myself. And I don't know if this is too late. I genuinely don't know. But I was not going to let today happen without standing in front of you and being sure." She looked at him, looked at the pieces of paper on the floor. "You tore up a legal contract," she said again. "I did," he said. "That was dramatic," she said. "I know," he said. Something moved across her face. Just briefly. "It was a little bit impressive," she said. He said nothing. She looked at the door Daniel had walked through. "I need to talk to him," she said. "I need to do that properly." before anything else. He deserves that. I know, Marcus said, and my father is at home a sitter, and he's going to be confused when I don't come back as a married woman. I know. And this? She gestured at the church, the guests, the scattered contract pieces, the general spectacular chaos of the situation, is a lot. I know, he said again. She looked at him. Stop saying I know, she said. Okay, he said. That's worse. Something happened on his face that was possibly the least controlled expression it had ever made. She put her hand out, palm up, the way you offer someone something you're not quite sure about. He looked at it. He took it. Her hand closed around his. 300 people let out approximately the collective breath of a small country. Come on, she said. We need to get out of here before someone films this. Already filmed, said someone in the fourth row. Grace closed her eyes briefly. Right, she said. She walked out, holding his hand, past 300 people who had never entirely stopped talking about this, through the doors of the old church and into the sunlight of a morning that had been expected to end one way and had ended completely the other. But here's the thing about real stories. Real stories don't end at the altar. They don't end when a hand is taken or the door is opened. They begin there because the dramatic moment is the easy part. Even when it's terrifying, even when it costs everything, there's a clarity to the dramatic moment that makes it survivable. It's everything after the dramatic moment that requires the actual work. And there was a great deal of everything after. The first thing she did was find Daniel. She found him outside, sitting on the steps of the church, jacket off, tie loosened, watching the street with the expression of a man who is processing something large. She sat next to him. They were quiet for a while. I should be angry, he said. You should be, she said. I'm not. I don't know what that says about me. That you're a good person, she said. He was quiet. How long, he said. She didn't pretend not to understand. The whole time, she said. Or, it was real what we had. I want you to know that. I wasn't performing. I wasn't killing time. I cared about you. But, he said, but there was this thing that I put away, she said. And I put away because it wasn't being offered to me. And a person can't build a life waiting for something that isn't being offered. So I chose you, and I meant it. He nodded. And then he walked in, said Daniel. And then he walked in, she said. He picked at a thread on his jacket. Then he said, is he worth it? This man who made you wait a year. She thought about it honestly. I don't know yet, she said. He's done the work, I think. I think he's different than he was. But I don't know. If he isn't, said Daniel, I want you to know that I am not the kind of person who says I told you so. I am the kind of person who just quietly continues to be a good architect. She laughed, a small, wet laugh. That's one of the things I love about you, she said. He nodded, stood up, put his jacket back on. Take care of yourself, Grace, he said. Really, not just for him. For you. I will, she said. He walked away. She sat on the steps of the church for a while longer. Marcus was standing 10 feet back, far enough to give her space, close enough to be there. When she stood up, she turned and looked at him. What now? She said. Whatever you want, he said. I'm not in charge of the timeline anymore. You are. She looked at him for a long moment. Can we go get coffee? She said. Something in his face that was not a smile, but was a thing that happens in a face just before a smile. Yes, he said. Not at my shop. Somewhere I've never been. I want to be a stranger somewhere today. I know a place, he said. They walked down the steps together. Neither of them were holding hands anymore. That would come back. But not yet. First, coffee. First, the conversation that should have happened a year ago. First, the actual beginning. They sat across from each other in a small Italian coffee shop on a street Marcus knew from years ago. Old mirrors on the walls. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody was watching. She had changed in the car, had a dress and a bag she'd packed. Practical Grace, always with contingency, and now she looked like herself again, or a version of herself that was new today and might be the version she'd be going forward. Hard to say. Some days make you. She wrapped her hands around her cup. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. No managing. No protecting. He told her. He told her about the building acquisition, and the morning he walked in, and the coffee, and the way something in him had gone still in a way it hadn't in years. He told her about Patterson and the profile, and being afraid of what his world would do to hers. He told her about the gala and the dance and the counter between them, and the moment she'd asked if he was sure, and the thing he'd said instead of the truth. He told her about the Tuesday night at 3 in the morning and what he'd understood. He told her about his father. He told her about the therapist on Tuesday afternoons. He told her about his mother's kitchen in Philadelphia and what his mother had said. She listened, all of it, the way she listened to everything, with her whole self, nothing held back for later. When he was done, she was quiet. "Can I tell you what it was like?" she said. "Yes," he said. She told him. She told him about watching him come in every morning, and particular feeling of someone seeing you, not the version of you that's performing competence, but the actual you, the tired version, the worried version, the one in the back room crying into the coffee beans. She told him about the night of the gala, and going home and telling herself it wasn't what she thought it was, and almost believing it. She told him about Daniel, that it wasn't nothing, that she'd genuinely tried, that she'd wanted deeply to be a person who could choose the uncomplicated thing and be satisfied by it. And then this morning, she said, "I was in the back room, and I was putting on the veil, and my hands were shaking, and I told myself it was nerves, just nerves. And then the door opened and the whole church went quiet, and I turned around and She stopped. "I wanted to be angry," she said. "I was ready to be angry. I had all the right reasons." "And," he said, "and you tore up the contract," she said. "And you looked at me, and you said 4 words. And my whole carefully built case for being angry just..." She put her hands flat on the table. "Gone. I'll spend a long time making up for the year," he said. "Yes," she said, "you will. Starting now, if you want," he said. She looked at him. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not a project. I'm not a woman to be won and then managed. My life is not glamorous. My father needs a lot of care. My shop is a small business. I don't need you to fix things. I need you to be present. That's all. Just present." "I understand," he said. "You think you do," she said. "But being present for someone really present is harder than any deal you've ever done, because deals have endpoints. People don't. You don't get to close the file." "I know," he said. "Then I know you said not to say that." "You can say it," she said. "Just mean it this time." "I mean it," he said. "All of it." She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her coffee cup. "This is good," she said. "Not as good as yours," he said. "No," she said. "But then nothing really is." 3 months passed. The world, being the world, did not simply step back and allow 2 people to be new at something in peace. The footage from the church, someone had filmed it, of course, because there are always cameras now, because a moment cannot simply be a moment anymore, was uploaded within 4 hours. By the following morning, it had been viewed 11 million times. Marcus Cole tearing up the marriage contract. The room silence. The 4 words. Grace's face. The internet had many opinions. Some found it the most romantic thing they'd ever seen. Some found it an appalling display of billionaire entitlement. Both reactions had merit, honestly. The world is large enough to contain both. Reporters wanted statements. Columnists wrote pieces. Someone made it into a movie pitch within a week. Patterson, the board member, called an emergency session. Marcus handled Patterson. It was not a comfortable meeting. Patterson sat across a conference table in the kind of suit that is wore as a kind of armor and said the words optics and proprietary and the board's confidence in various arrangements. And Marcus listened to all of it and then said very calmly that he had run this company for 11 years, that the company's performance had returned 22% above market for the last 7 of those years, and that his private life was his private life, and that if the board had concerns about his leadership capacity, they were welcome to call a formal vote. Nobody called a formal vote. Patterson sat back in his chair. "I just don't want to see you distracted," Patterson said. "I'm less distracted than I've been in years," Marcus said. Grace, for her part, handled the attention with the precise same quality she handled everything. She was kind when she needed to be kind. She was clear when she needed to be clear. She declined every interview. She put a small handwritten sign in the window of the coffee shop that said, "We're still open. Come in for coffee." Nothing else to see here. Customers came in droves. Not everyone for coffee. She was gentle about it. She hired 2 more staff. She paid everyone fairly. She moved her father into a better care facility. Not because Marcus pushed her to. He understood by now that pushing Grace was a specific kind of futile. But because the footage of tension had come with a financial reality she couldn't ignore, the shop was now doing 3 times its previous business, and she could afford the better facility. And her father deserved it. She visited him every day. Marcus came with her, sometimes on Sunday mornings, with good coffee and shortbread cookies. Her father, on a good day, would look at Marcus and say, "Are you the coffee man?" Something like that. Marcus would say. Her father would nod, satisfied. "Good man," he'd say. "Grace needs good people." On the bad days, her father didn't quite know who Grace was, and Marcus had learned to sit with her through the bad days without trying to fix them, which was the hardest thing he'd ever done, and also, he'd realized, the right thing. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be witnessed. For months after the church. Something new. Something that crept in from a direction Marcus hadn't been watching. He'd been watching Patterson. He'd been watching the press. He'd been watching himself, honestly. Paying attention to every choice, every tendency, trying to be the man he'd spent 8 months building toward. What he hadn't been watching was his company's acquisition history. He had a large team. He delegated. These were, in his world, virtues. A development project in the south side of Chicago, a large mixed-use development, commercial and residential, significant. The kind of thing his company did turned out to contain within its boundary a block of small businesses, a dry cleaner, a barber shop, a community center, and here was the part that arrived on a Thursday morning in the form of a briefing document and sat in his stomach like a stone. The property from which Grace's father's original engineering firm had operated. The building that still had, above its door, a small brass plate with her father's name on it. The development wouldn't reach that particular block for 3 years. It was early stage, but it was there in the documents, and he had known about it. His signature was on the acquisition map, the same way his signature had been on the original coffee shop building. And Grace didn't know. He sat with this for 3 hours. Then he called Judith. "Cancel everything today," he said. "Everything," said Judith. "Everything." He drove to the coffee shop. Grace was in the middle of a busy morning. He waited. He sat at the counter. He drank his coffee. He waited for the rush to pass. When it did, he said, "I need to show you something, and I need you to know that I found out this morning, and I am telling you immediately, and I am not going to let it happen." She looked at him. He showed her the documents. She read them. She was quiet for a long time. "The building with his name." She said, "Yes," he said. "How long until?" 3 years minimum, and it's not going to happen. I'm pulling the block from the development. Today. She looked at him. "That costs you money." "Quite a bit," he said. "I don't care." She looked back at the document. "The community center, too," she said. "The whole block," he said. "We'll redesign around it." She set the document down. "You could have not told me," she said. "It was 3 years away. You could have quietly pulled the block, and I never would have known." "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you?" He met her eyes. "Because I am done making decisions for you, Grace. I'm done deciding what you need to know and what you don't, even when it makes me look bad. You get to know everything now. All of it. Whatever I'm involved in. You get full visibility." She looked at him for a very long time. "That's the right answer," she said. "I know," he said. "You can say I know," she said, with something small moving at the corner of her mouth. "It sounds different now." He stayed for 2 hours. He redesigned the development boundary with his team over the phone. Judith handled the architects. The community center stayed. The barbershop stayed. The dry cleaner stayed. The building with her father's name above the door stayed. It cost 7% of projected development value. He wrote the loss off without ceremony, 5 months after the church. She said, "I love you." They were in his car. They'd been at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. The same one, the same charity gala, almost exactly 2 years after the first time. Same dress, the dark green one. Same room, different people than they'd been. He had driven her home. Her father had had a difficult week. She was tired, not the sleep kind, the deeper kind. They were parked outside her building. The streetlight made a soft circle around the car. It wasn't raining. It was a clear, cold November night, and the city was very still. She said it looking straight ahead, not at him. "I love you," she said. "I should have said it a long time ago. I knew it before Daniel. I knew it when I chose not to tell you, because I didn't think I could survive you not saying it back. And I'm saying it now because I don't want to keep anything away from you that's true." He was quiet. She turned and looked at him. He said, "I have loved you since October, since the first morning. I just didn't know how to be a man who deserved to say it." She looked at him. "Are you that man now?" she said. "I'm working on it," he said. She laughed. "The real one, the full one." He reached over and tucked a strand of hair away from her face. Just that small, careful, intentional gesture that costs nothing and means everything. She leaned into it, just slightly. "Come upstairs," she said. "My dad made us leave some soup." "Your dad made soup?" "He had a good day," she said. He remembered the recipe. He always made soup in November. He followed her upstairs. They sat in her small apartment with the soup her father had made on a good day, and the city was outside the windows, and it was the most ordinary evening in the world. It was also the best evening Marcus Cole had had in as long as he could remember, 6 months after the church. Patterson resigned from the board. This had nothing to do with Grace and everything to do with a series of governance disagreements that had been building long before the church. But Marcus would be dishonest if he didn't note that the resignation was easier to manage than it would have been a year ago. A year ago, he'd have spent months on it. He spent 3 days. Because the difference, it turned out, between a man who runs an empire from a place of fear and a man who runs it from a place of being genuinely actually okay, the difference is enormous. In efficiency, yes, but more than that in clarity. You make better decisions. You see things more accurately. You stop over-controlling the things that don't need it and start paying more attention to the things that do. His therapist, whom he still saw on Tuesday afternoons, told him this was called the difference between anxious attachment and secure functioning, and had a lot to say about neurological regulation and relational safety. Marcus mostly just thought about it as, when you're not afraid of losing everything, you make better choices about everything. He was not afraid of losing everything anymore. He was afraid of specific things. The loss of Grace's father, which was coming slowly, and which he could not prevent, and which he was choosing to face with her rather than from a distance. The way Grace sometimes pushed herself too hard and forgot to eat. His own old habits of withdrawal, which he caught more quickly now, but still caught. Real fears, the kind that are worth being afraid of because they are about real things you actually love. 7 months after the church, he asked her, not at an event, not in a restaurant, not in any of the places people ask, because they're performing the asking. He asked her in the coffee shop, after closing, when she was wiping down the counter, and he was at his usual spot, and the mismatched chairs were in their usual spots, and the photograph of her mother was on the wall. He didn't have a ring yet. He considered and rejected the idea of presenting a ring he'd chosen without her, because Grace was a woman who should choose her own ring, and the ring was beside the point anyway. "I would like to spend my life with you," he said, "not because I need something from you, not because you fix anything for me, because you are exactly who you are, and I want to be the person who gets to be next to that for as long as I can. If you want that too, I would like us to figure out what it looks like, together, whatever shape it needs to take." She stopped wiping the counter. She looked at him. No dramatic gesture this time, she observed. "I tore up a contract at a wedding," he said. "I used my dramatic gesture budget." She laughed. He did too. She looked at him with a whole complicated, beautiful look, the one that contained everything, all of it. The year of waiting and the fear and the grief and the soup on a good November day and the Sunday mornings with shortbread cookies and the look on his face when he walked into the church, and she understood, with the clarity of someone who has spent a lifetime paying attention, that this was the thing. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, not easy. The thing. "Yes," she said, The word landed in the air between them like something permanent. He let out a breath. She came around the counter. He stood up. They stood very close to each other in the empty coffee shop with the mismatched chairs and the chalkboard menu and the photograph of her mother and the city outside, moving the way cities move, relentlessly in all directions. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. She put her hand on his chest. He put his over hers. That was all. That was everything. Epilogue. 1 year after the day he walked into the church. Grace's father had a ceremony, not a wedding, not a birthday. A small, specific ceremony that Grace had organized at the care facility where he lived now. A good facility, bright and warm, with staff who knew his name and his habits, and that he liked his coffee strong and his cookies shortbread. She'd invited a few people. His old colleagues from the engineering firm. 3 of them showed up. Old men with good handshakes, and the kind of eyes that have seen a lot of bridges. She'd had a small display made. Photographs. His designs. The bridges. The beautiful, precise geometries of things her father had held in his mind back when his mind was a country he had full access to. And she hung, at the center of the display, a photograph that one of her staff had taken without telling her 6 months ago on a Sunday morning. Her father in his chair, holding a coffee cup, looking at something in the distance with the peaceful expression of a man who is somewhere good, even if he couldn't tell you exactly where. And next to him, sitting close, Marcus Cole, also looking into the distance, not performing anything, not trying to fix anything, just there. Her father looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus, who was standing nearby. "Are you the coffee man?" her father asked. "Yes," said Marcus. "Today, yes." That was the right answer today. Her father nodded. "Grace needs good people," he said. "I know," Marcus said. Her father smiled, turned back to the display, looked at his bridges. Grace slipped her hand into Marcus's. He held it. Outside, the city went on being a city. Inside, her father remembered his bridges for an afternoon, and 2 imperfect people stood in a warm room and held on to each other and the thing that had been built between them, which was not made of money or grand gestures or dramatic moments, but of ordinary mornings and honest words and the particular, irreplaceable gift of someone who shows up again and again, even when it's hard, especially then, the end. But also, as it always is with real stories, the beginning. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story moved you, if you felt something, if you cried, if you had a pause, if you found yourself saying yes, then you understand exactly what this is for. Leave a comment with 1 word for what you felt. Share it with someone who needs to believe that people can do the hard work and come back for what they love. And if you want more stories like this, big, emotional, real, true, subscribe and come back, because there are more stories where this one came from, and they're all waiting for you.